Your memories
of Her Majesty's extraordinary reign.
Send us your stories, photographs and videos
at jubilee@gbnews.uk.
Come and celebrate with us
on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
with honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome once again to On the Money, where we're focused on the UK's cost of living crisis, helping you beat the squeeze. I'm Liam Halligan, and for the next hour, we'll be talking fuel prices, particularly the cost of petrol and diesel, because filling up a diesel car now costs more than £100. How high can fuel prices go, not least for van drivers and hauliers? We discuss spiralling fuel and utility bills for motorists and households. Calling on Chancellor Rishi Sunak to finally scrap the VAT on fuel bills. On the Money, after the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's 1 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. A senior Ukrainian official says the latest European sanctions on Russia are not enough. The EU agreed last night to cut 90% of oil imports from Russia by the end of this year. The 10% of imports still allowed will temporarily be exempt from the ban, so that Hungary, Slovakia and the Czech Republic will still have access to Russian oil. Well, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says the EU plans to fully cut out oil imports in the near future.
Now left over is around about 10 or 11% that are covered by the southern Družba. And indeed, here we have agreed, this is for the moment being exempted. We have agreed to that the Council will revert to the topic as soon as possible in one way or the other. So this is a topic where we'll come back to and where we will still have to work on. But it is a big step forward, what we did today.
The Conservative MP Andrea Leadsom says the unacceptable failings of leadership found in Sue Gray's Partygate report cannot be tolerated and are the responsibility of the Prime Minister. In a letter to her constituents, the former minister said it's extremely unlikely that senior leaders were unaware of what was going on in Number 10. She says each Conservative MP must now decide on the right course of action that will restore confidence in our government. It comes after 3 Conservatives openly called for Mr Johnson to resign following Sue Gray's report. GB News has been told that plans to send hundreds of asylum seekers to a former RAF base in North Yorkshire are being delayed amid a legal challenge. Well, let's find out more. Our Home and Security Editor Mark White has been investigating and is live at the base now. Afternoon, Mark. What's happened?
Well, here in Linton on News, the villagers are monitoring the latest development with interest. No celebrations as yet, though, as it still remains the goal of the Home Office to have asylum seekers housed here at the former RAF base, just a few hundred yards from this location. Now, we're told that because of a pre-action protocol, a notice by the local authority that they may carry out legal action, and also because of some logistical issues, that the plans to put the first of those asylum seekers into the former RAF base have been paused temporarily. But they are likely to resume. When, though, we don't know as yet. The Home Office say that it is still their intention to use this base, as it's important to get away from the reliance on 30,000 hotel rooms every day, which is causing the UK taxpayer, or costing the UK taxpayer, some £5 million each day.
Mark, thank you very much. Now, rape victims are being asked to hand over too much personal data, despite a government pledge to overhaul how cases are investigated. Well, that's the analysis of the UK's independent regulator for data protection, who says excessive scrutiny of those who report rape means they feel they're being treated as suspects. The Information Commissioner says digital strip searches, in which victims' phones are seized for analysis, must stop if police want people to report attacks. More than 1 in 10 people have skipped meals due to rising food prices, while 8% have prioritised meals for other family members. The consumer group Which says surging living costs mean 57% of us are being forced to make adjustments, including cutting back on essentials, taking out loans or borrowing from family and friends. They also found around 2 million households have missed a household bill, credit card or a loan payment. The Shadow Transport Secretary says flight delays are the government's fault, as they didn't ensure airports had the required staff levels. EasyJet and British Airways are cancelling flights every day, while passengers at airports like Heathrow, Gatwick, Manchester and Bristol are reporting long delays. The aviation industry is suffering from staff shortages after thousands were let go during the pandemic. Louise Hayes said the government had been warned this would happen when holidays picked up.
Look, the government had been warned many months ago that losing skilled workers from the aviation industry would cause significant delays when people started going back on holiday. They knew that airports did not have the staff for security, for ground control, for cabin crew, and they knew that people would be going on holiday over the half term. So it's simply not good enough that people are having to wait hours and hours to get through security, and in some instances missing their flights and their holidays entirely.
We reached out to the government, who said they've changed the law over training new employees, which should help the industry fill vacancies more quickly. The government, though, did make clear that the aviation industry was responsible for making sure they have enough staff, and said the sector must step up recruitment. You're now up to date on GB News, and I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's return to Liam and On the Money.
And coming up on The Money today, filling a diesel family car now costs over 100 quid. How high can fuel prices go? Quite a bit higher, given that oil prices are steadily rising. So when will Chancellor Rishi Sunak finally lower VAT on petrol and diesel, giving hard-pressed motorists a break? And how about scrapping VAT on household fuel bills while you're at it, Chancellor? As On the Money's been calling for months and months. Plus, the UK City of Culture winner will be announced tonight, with the county of Durham and Bradford amongst some of the places nominated. Our North East of England reporter has the story. And each day On the Money features an in-depth Money Talks interview. Today we're talking to former Treasury Minister Angela Knight, and On the Money regular, Dame Angela's something of an expert when it comes to energy. But she's also been a campaigning MP with her finger on the pulse of policy making and government. We ask Angela Knight what the government should now do to help households and businesses cope with spiralling energy costs. That's later in the show. And as ever, I want your questions, opinions, ideas. What do you think of the issues raised here on The Money? How do they impact you? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews. I'll be reading out some of your messages later in the show, so stay with us, because this is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're on the money. Save us from the £100 fill-up. That's my message to Chancellor Rishi Sunak as the price of petrol and diesel soars and the government's tax take on that fuel keeps rising. As oil prices increase and with some retailers accused of profiteering, petrol and diesel prices are spiralling. Petrol hit an average of 172.73 pence per litre on forecourts across Britain on Sunday. That's according to the AA. And diesel prices are even higher, averaging 182.59 pence, which means if you fill up a diesel family car with a conventional 55-litre tank, that now costs over £100. Petrol and diesel prices are already up around 40% on a year ago. And with oil prices heading up over recent weeks, it seems there's more to come. Most drivers fill up twice a month, and that means motorists' fuel bills have surged almost £60 a month since last May, an extra £800 a year. And of course, the increase for commercial drivers and those running a van for work is far more. As petrol and diesel prices rise, the Treasury gets more and more VAT, accounting for 20% of the price we pay, of course. Chancellor Rishi Sunak cut fuel duty, that's a separate tax, by 5% back in March. But many retailers have been accused by the government of not passing that tax cut on. And even with that fuel duty reduction, around half of what we pay on the forecourt still goes to tax. And we're buying fuel for our vehicles out of our post-tax incomes already. The high cost of diesel in particular is, in my view, a disgrace. It's a workhorse fuel for 4 million van drivers and countless haulage companies across Britain. Their rocketing bills will be passed on to consumers, pushing up broader inflation and the cost of living for everyone. And with oil now above $120 a barrel, 2/3 up on a year ago, the price of petrol, diesel and a host of other energy sources is, I'm afraid, set to spiral. So Chancellor Sunak, it's time to cut VAT on petrol, diesel and household utility bills while you're at it. And that's our On the Money question today. When will Rishi Sunak finally cut tax on fuel? This is On the Money, and we have expert discussions with people who really know their stuff, as ever. That's why I'm delighted to welcome Howard Cox of the Fair Fuel Campaign. We have the CEO of National Energy Action, Adam Scorer, and we have Victoria Scholar in the studio. She is Head of Investment at Interactive Investor. Victoria, let's turn to you first. You heard my piece there on fuel and energy prices, so it's petrol and diesel for motorists, household utility bills, of course, it's all interlinked. But just tell us the backdrop to this, which is the rising price of oil. I featured the oil price on the money yesterday. It was around $115 a barrel for Brent crude, and now it's around $120. What's happening?
Well, actually, Brent crude is even higher than that. It's at around $124 a barrel now. We have seen both WTI, which is the US benchmark, as well as Brent crude, the global benchmark, trading in a very volatile manner, but largely within a range. But we've started to see it break out to the upside. This is mainly driven by the EU's ban on 90% of Russian oil imports that was announced just last night. That's been really propelling prices higher, particularly in anticipation of that decision. We saw this run up in prices. Also in China, there's been concerns about an economic slowdown because of its draconian COVID zero tolerance policy. Now it's started to ease some of those restrictions, so we could see more demand come back online for the world's second largest economy. And then later this week, we have a meeting from OPEC Plus, which is the oil output cartel, which controls a lot of the oil supply in the market.
It's the energy exporters, isn't it? A lot of Middle Eastern countries,
and
Venezuela
Russia as well.
Indeed.
And what we're expecting from them is, despite calls from the West to release more supply to the markets, it's actually going to continue to drip feed the market with a little bit of supply at each meeting. because, of course, they like high oil prices. So they're pushing back against the West. They're sticking to their guns. We've also got that strong or improving demand picture from China and that EU oil ban on Russia. All of those together are culminating to push prices higher, like we're seeing this week.
It strikes me, Victoria, there's a kind of geopolitical shift going on. In the past, we've been able to, well, in certainly recent years, the Western energy importers, not least us here in the UK, we've been able to rely on OPEC because it's run by the Saudis and they're generally a kind of ally of the West to do lots of business deals and so on. But OPEC plus, the oil exporters cartel plus Russia, they seem to be not doing the West any favours at the moment. They know we're hurting from a cost of living crisis. They know that the cost of living crisis is being made worse because we're trying to put sanctions on Russia. And the Saudis and the Qataris and the other OPEC energy exporters, they don't seem to be helping us.
No, and obviously we saw them curtail a lot of that supply output when we were at the height of the pandemic and there was rock bottom demand. So they pulled back on the supply to try and measure out that supply-demand imbalance. But now that we've seen post-COVID demand go supercharged, they've decided to almost continue with this drip-feed, slow mentality of releasing supply. So that's creating this imbalance where demand is massively outstripping supply and they're benefiting from those rising oil prices. But it does look as though there could be further upside for oil prices from here, which of course will turn to a higher petrol and diesel costs at the forecourt.
Beautifully done. Victoria Scholar there, setting out the scene for this domestic debate about fuel prices, particularly petrol and diesel. And I can now bring in Howard Cox from Fair Fuel Campaign. Howard, you're often on the show. We've talked a lot about petrol and diesel prices. They're going up, up and up some more. What should Rishi Sunak do?
Well, he should act immediately. It's crippling small businesses, it's crippling drivers right across the nation, and it's impacting on inflation, the cost of goods, everything he should be doing now. Should be cutting fuel duty again, double digit, and cutting VAT, which I support. GB News call for that for years. So please, Rishi, if you're listening, do something now. And we also need that pump watch. We need that body, the regulatory body, to stop that opportunistic profiteering. I apologise, I'm in the car at the moment. I'm just about to go and meet a minister to talk about this subject.
Which is why you're always worth talking to, Howard Cox, if I may say so. We saw some movement over the weekend. We had the Prime Minister, no less, as if he hasn't got enough on his mind, saying that he's concerned about something that you and I have raised, about something that Kwasi Kwarteng, the Energy Secretary, has raised here on the money, the notion that energy, petrol, diesel retailers aren't passing on the lower fuel duty, that they're profiteering. Those huge numbers that I talked about at the top of the show, 182p for diesel, they're, of course, average numbers. Many GB News viewers and listeners now will be saying to their televisions and radios, I just paid £2.
You're absolutely right, Liam. I'm afraid it's going to get worse as well. We understand the EU have negotiated cutting down, only down to 25% oil and fuel from Russia. So these opportunistic speculators will jump on that. It's manna from heaven for them to pump up prices even further. I think we'll be seeing diesel at 190 very shortly.
Wow. And that's, of course, an average price. Howard, go and do your thing with the minister. Give us a call later. Let me know how it went. Off the record, of course, as ever. Let's turn now to the idea of household utility bills, because they're all interlinked. Of course, a lot of electricity is generated by gas in this country. A lot of people, their homes are fuelled by oil as well, particularly in rural parts of the UK. And, of course, oil and gas prices are closely related. Let's talk to you, Ruth London. You're also an On the Money regular. You're co-director of the Fuel Poverty Action Group. I haven't spoken to you since the latest slabs, if you like, of assistance from Rishi Sunak. What do you think of the Chancellor's latest statement, particularly those aspects of it that are meant to help people like you, people who are deeply concerned about rising household utility bills?
They're substantial sums. But you have to remember where we're starting from. Before the pandemic, let alone the rising fuel prices, we already had 10,000 people a year dying in this country because they couldn't afford to keep their homes warm. people are at such a low ebb now with all the onslaught of rising prices, national insurance. People working 2 or 3 jobs can't afford to feed their families and are going to food banks. And pensioners, of course, are hit very hard, as are people with disabilities. So that the sums that he's given, they're a start. But if you look at it, for instance, there's like for people on means-tested benefits, £650. The biggest means-tested benefit is universal credit, and over 1,000 was cut when the £20 a week reduction was taken away last autumn. So you're running ahead a step and then moving back 2 steps at the same time. People are not in any way satisfied. Some people looked at it and said, this sounded good. But, then we start hearing from people who are just on the edge. They're going to get £400, but the bills have gone up £1,500. And if they were a little bit lower in income, they might qualify for the extra £650, but they don't, but they can't manage to eat. So it is absolutely not sufficient. Plus, we're saying that the money should really come from the companies that are actually making the money off what's in our bills. They're not paying more. They're just profiteering because they can put the prices up higher. And they're making these billions. And that money should be taken back in windfall taxes and in ending the subsidies to these companies. And yet, he's taken with one hand from them and he's giving back with the other. He says he's going to pay back 91 pence in the pound for everything that they invest in their own industry. What other industry gets that?
Ruth, you've put it so well. I really can't stress enough how much I agree with you. There's lots of tricksy stuff going on. He's giving money here, he's taking money away there. I think he should be doing much bigger and bolder things like scrapping VAT on those domestic fuel bills that we've been discussing. We'll carry on with you in one moment, Ruth. I just want to bring in Adam Scorer. I do apologise, and we'll carry on this discussion after the break. Adam, you've been waiting very, very patiently. I really appreciate you being here on The Money. You've been a very important voice for us on this issue over many weeks and months now. It's the first time I've spoken to you publicly again since that latest tranche of assistance from Rishi Sunak. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's great to be here with Fuel Poverty in stereo with Ruth as well. I think Ruth was right. These are big numbers. For the first time, we've seen government take an active decision to target most of the support to people on the lowest incomes, and that's hugely welcome. But what it does, it offsets the likely rise in October. It doesn't address the stratospheric rises we've had so far, and we still know that we have the prospect of another rise in January when Ofgem changed the way in which they calculate the price cap. It's a one-off measure. It's really welcome, but this isn't a one-off solution. So as well as being able to put more money to households who are really struggling, and we hear almost every day about the differential way in which low-income households are hit by inflationary pressures on essentials, food and fuel in particular. So as well as the urgent and important issue of putting money in the pockets of people on the lowest incomes as we come to winter, structurally, there's things that the Chancellor and the Bays and Ofgem need to do around introducing social tariffs, around really getting serious about energy efficiency, about addressing the standing charge. And you're right that VAT is one of those issues that might get considered, but we still need targeted measures for people on the lowest incomes. VAT, of course, is a universal broad measure that won't bring support to people who really need it. But it's time to acknowledge that the urgent and immediate need for money in the pockets has to be hand in hand with a much more strategic long-term structural changes to the way in which people use energy, pay for energy, and are supported in their energy needs.
Adam, we'll pick up this conversation with you after the break. Adam Scorer there. He is CEO of National Energy Action. Ruth London staying with us. She is from Fuel Poverty Action Group and, of course, Victoria Scholar in the studio, giving us the big picture. A very, very important discussion. When will Rishi Sunak finally start to lower taxes on those fuel bills, petrol, diesel, household utilities? There's conversations here on GB News, TV, DAB+, digital radio and online. Stay with us. You're on The Money.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome back. You're on the money. It's 1:23. We are discussing fuel bills as ever. We're talking about the £100 cost of filling up your 55-litre standard family saloon with diesel. We're talking about the spiralling cost of petrol, all of it bolstered by higher oil prices. And, of course, we're talking about those rising household utility bills as gas prices go up as well. I'm still with my expert panel, co-director of Fuel Poverty Action Group, Ruth London, CEO of National Energy Action, Adam Scorer, and Victoria Scholar here in the studio. She's head of investment at Interactive Investor. Victoria, let's go back to you now. We talked about higher oil prices earlier. Oil and gas prices, they're kind of interlinked.
Yeah.
There's this oil prices are going up now because the EU's put some kind of embargo on Russian oil arriving in Western Europe.
Yep.
Are the markets expecting oil prices to go much higher? They're now 2/3 higher than they were this time last year.
Well, I'd say that recently we've seen oil prices largely stuck in a range, despite the fact that we have seen wild swings in both directions, because there's been push and pulls in both directions. There's been concerns about an economic slowdown, particularly from China, which has been putting some downside pressure on prices. And then
there's less demand for oil.
Less demand,
so
exactly.
The prices go down, yeah.
Yeah, so concerns about a potential global recession, for example, tend to put downside pressure on oil because obviously as the economy slows, there'll be less demand for cars and airplanes and manufacturing. Then on the supply side, with the war in Ukraine and the geopolitical uncertainty, that's been putting pressure, or at least potential expected pressure, on supply. So that has been keeping a floor on prices, which is why we've been struggling for any kind of directional momentum for oil prices. But it looks as though with this EU-wide Russian import ban, or at least 90%, now we're seeing a sort of upside breakout for prices. So it does look like, at least in the short term, the bias is towards the upside.
And it seems that China is escaping or re-emerging from lockdown. A lot of Chinese factories have been locked down, of course. They are the world's biggest energy importer. They seem to be moving away from their zero COVID, zero tolerance policy because of social unrest and all kinds of difficulties. So once the biggest manufacturer in the world gets back into gear, they're going to suck in a lot of oil imports. And so that pushes the price of oil up as well. Isn't it amazing how these massive geopolitical economic trends affect us here in the UK so hugely? Talking of which, let's go back to Ruth London. She is of the Fuel Poverty Action Group. She's co-director. She's helped set up the Fuel Poverty Action Group. Ruth, do you think the politicians get it yet? You and I have talked on this show before, and we've both felt that the media and political class didn't understand the extent of this cost of living crisis. Do you think, following Rishi Sunak's statement last week, albeit in the eyes of many a long-delayed statement, that he does finally get it?
Frankly, they seem to be wedded to the interests of the oil and gas industry. You know, you don't have to put prices up when demand goes up. In France, where the EDF is nationally, publicly owned, prices went up 4% when they went up 54% in this country. It's not a law of nature. It is people profiteering. And the answer, as people have been saying on this program, has to be structural. First of all, we need better structures in our homes. We need insulation. Secondly, we need to move away from oil and gas because they are not cheap and not reliable source of energy. And thirdly, we need to restructure pricing. And Fuel Poverty Action are proposing a completely different system called Energy for All, where everybody would get a band of energy free to cover the essentials, to keep warm, keep the lights on, not splurge, but stay safe, stay secure. And that would mean that instead of the present situation where you're actually paying more per unit if you use less, and people who cut down to practically nothing still clobbered with this really high standing charge, instead of that, people would have the security of knowing that they had enough to get by and then pay more for what they use over their own needs. Obviously, some people need more because of health reasons or whatever, but over their needs, they would pay more for it. And the money could come from those huge profits that are being made by these companies off our backs, you know, while our children go hungry.
I think a lot of people will be voting for you. I think a lot of people will be voting for you as Chancellor, Ruth. The rate at which you're going, you seem to be making a lot of sense to me. Now let's welcome back to On the Money George Wallace. He's a GB News viewer who's in his 80s, and George is based over in North East Wales. George, a pleasure to welcome you back to the show. Do you think the political and media class understand the extent of this cost of living crisis? How are you muddling through?
Well, I'm muddling through very nicely at the moment, but perhaps I'm just insensitive. I don't know. No problems here at the moment. I do very, very little mileage. I've turned off the oil heating, which doesn't really matter at this time of year anyway. I've cut down on my electricity use simply by being more efficient. And I get free logs, provided a tree falls on the estate every now and then. So I think I'm one of the very lucky ones, probably.
Across other colleagues, neighbours, friends, relatives in your locality, across the rest of the community? And how are you getting on, George, in terms of food prices? Because for many people, this cost of living squeeze isn't only about fuel, it's about food as well.
Can't honestly say at the moment it's affected me very much. I've been more concerned with a rising waistline rather than rising food prices, so perhaps that's balancing itself out. But I do like pasta and I do like bread, so I'm going to cop it next time I go shopping, perhaps.
And we know that pasta and bread prices have gone up very steeply, don't we? Let's have a last brief word from Adam Scorer of National Energy Action. Adam, National Energy Action is a well-connected lobby group. Are you hearing anything from ministers in terms of additional help, given that we know the energy price cap is going to soar again this autumn, possibly going up by another 800 quid or so to around £2,800? That's the average household fuel bill.
I don't think at the moment we're seeing any great signs that government have got preset plans for if or when the energy price cap goes up again. You asked a question about whether we think government gets it. I think government gets it. It had to do something, that politically it had to do something for the people on the lowest incomes. But I think we've been touching on it, haven't we? That this winter, despite that intervention, is going to be horrific for people who cannot afford the basics of food, who cannot afford to heat and power their homes. And the challenge has been addressed, but it has not been solved. And the huge likelihood, especially if prices go up again in January, is that government simply will have to come back and support people whose lives will be devastated by it. But when it does that, and I think it will have to, it must do it. It just simply must do it in tandem with a series of structural changes that tries to build this problem out of our homes and out of our energy systems for good.
Adam's saying, and I think rightly, the government is going to have to do more as energy prices spiral. That's what everyone expects. We know from wholesale gas prices already that's going to push up the fuel cap this coming autumn. But the government seems to want to implement borrowing and spending rises rather than tax cuts, which is what I'm trying to push for. And that borrowing and spending, it could be inflationary, couldn't it, Victoria?
Well, it could, and I think that the aid package that we saw was actually sort of viewed as more generous than anticipated, this £15 billion injection of sort of helicopter money, if you will, direct into people's pockets, particularly for the low-income households. But yeah, like you say, one of the side effects of this fiscal stimulus can be that it could be inflationary, and inflation is one of the biggest drivers of the cost of living crisis. You know, we've got price levels now at 9%, and they're expected to head into double digits.
That number. I think the real rate of inflation is a lot higher than that. I'm not saying that the Office for National Statistics are being, flip. I just think the methodology doesn't capture people's lived experience. That's just a personal view.
And I think everyone's inflation rate is actually very different because it really does depend on what types of food you buy. You know, we learned yesterday that pasta, for example, has jumped by 50% since last year, but actually cheese and pizza have actually gone down in price. So it can be very subtle changes that will affect your personal inflation level. But yeah, like you say, the aggregate number is 9% at the moment, but a lot of people are noticing much, much steeper price rises than that.
Victoria Scholar of Interactive Investor, great to have you with us, as ever. It's been a fabulous discussion with Ruth London of Fuel Poverty Action Group, Alan Scorer of National Energy Action. We had Howard Cox, of course, from Fair Fuel UK, and George Wallace, GB News viewer. Great to have you back, George. Watch that waistline. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Coming up, it's today's Money Talks interview with Angela Knight, another friend of the show. She's the former CEO of Energy UK and, of course, a former Treasury Minister. She knows where the bodies are buried when it comes to government and policy making. That's after the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's 1:34. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. More than 1 in 10 people have skipped meals due to rising food prices, while 8% have prioritised meals for other family members. Consumer group Which says surging living costs mean 57% of us are being forced to make adjustments, including cutting back on essentials and taking out loans. They also found around 2 million households have missed a housing bill, credit card or a loan payment. The EU agreed last night to cut 90% of oil imports from Russia by the end of this year. 10% of imports will temporarily exempt from that ban so that Hungary, Slovakia and Czech Republic will still have access to Russian oil. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says that the EU plans to fully cut all imports in the near future. Flight cancellations are continuing to hit holidaygoers, coinciding with this week's school half-term and the long Jubilee bank holiday weekend. EasyJet, British Airways, they're cancelling flights every day, while passengers at airports such as Heathrow, Gatwick, Manchester and Bristol are reporting long delays. The aviation industry is suffering from staff shortages after thousands were let go during the pandemic. Conservative MP John Stevenson says he's submitted a letter of no confidence in the Prime Minister. 3 other Conservative MPs openly have called for Mr Johnson to resign following Sue Gray's report. Separately, the Conservative MP Andrea Leadsom says the unacceptable failings of leadership found in Sue Gray's Partygate report cannot be tolerated and are the responsibility of the Prime Minister. Writing to her constituents, the former minister said each Conservative MP must now decide on the right course of action that will restore confidence in our government. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound is 1.258 to the dollar. The pound is 1.74 to the euro. The price of gold currently stands at £1,470 and 9 pence per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the finance report on GB News for real-time investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
On radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
we're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome back. You're on the money. It's 1:38. We've been talking about Chancellor Rishi Sunak on this programme today, and he's been out and about this afternoon on a visit in the North East. He was asked whether his U-turn on a windfall tax and support for families had come too late.
Well, I know things are difficult for many and people are anxious about the months ahead, and that's why last week we announced £15 billion of new support to help with the cost of living, with a third of all households, the most vulnerable, receiving around £1,200 in help. But there's also support available for everyone, including £400 off energy bills in the autumn. We said we would stand by the British people through this challenging time, and that's what we delivered last week.
But we have spoken to users of food banks in the North East who say they're already in debt, they're already in arrears, and they feel this is just a sticking plaster. They need something long term.
Well, combined with the support that we've already announced, we've now put in place £37 billion worth of help, and that's going to make an enormous difference to people, particularly the most vulnerable. But it means, for example, together with all the other changes that we've made, a single mother with 2 children working full-time on the national living wage is going to get something like £2,500 extra this year to help cope with some of the challenges that they're facing. So I'm confident this will make a meaningful difference to millions of families across the country.
Chancellor Rishi Sunak there talking in the North East of England. For my money, it shouldn't be about borrowing, money printing and spending. It should be about letting people keep more of their own money and scrapping VAT on fuel bills. Having a look at maybe suspending those green levies on fuel bills, which account for 25% of what we pay for our electricity. We'll see what happens. Now, tonight, we'll find out which cities scooped the title of the UK's City of Culture 2025. 20 cities and areas were nominated, and the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport shortlisted County Durham, Wrexham County, Southampton and Bradford, all of which would be worthy winners, of course. Our North East of England reporter Rachel Sweeney has been at Beamish Museum, the Living Museum of the North in County Durham, to talk about what winning the title would mean for tourism and the local economy where she is.
The bid team here in County Durham
say the win would secure colossal social and economic benefits. Now, the title of UK City of Culture 2025 would bring 2,500 new jobs in creative industries, 200 creative enterprises to the county by 2029. It would directly support almost 1,000 businesses and bring £41.5 million into contracts and local suppliers because of projects. 15 million people it would bring to the region. Everybody wants that for where they live, an economic boost. Now, joining me now is Rhiannon Hiles, who is the Chief Executive of Beamish Museum, the living museum of the North. Rhiannon, it's so whimsical here, isn't it? For our viewers and listeners who don't know, can you describe Beamish?
In one word, a fantastic living open-air museum. So we're a gem in the northeast, and absolutely we're phenomenal in terms of our scale. We're over 300 acres worth of visit, and we have absolutely loads of different exhibits and experiences. We're standing in front of the 1950s terrace, which opened recently, and we've just opened another part of our 1950s Remaking Beamish project as well. We have the 1900s, we have the 1950s, we have the 1820s, and the 1940s. My goodness, so a real travel through time.
It really is. I remember coming here on a school trip. But you know, tonight there is a very special event. Can you talk us through that?
Yes, indeed. So we're here very early today in the run-up to something which we've all been working towards across the last year, put our hearts and souls into it. You talked to Alison Clark earlier, and we've put a lot of energy. The communities and the people of Durham and Durham County have put a lot of energy into this, and it's been brilliant to work with everybody. So with any luck, we're going to win UK City of Culture 2025. If we don't win, we're still signed up to a brilliant programme of activities, and culture venues like Beamish are all signed up to support that. But let's hope that we win, and it's going to be brilliant this evening. The atmosphere is going to be electric, I think.
If County Durham does win, it'll make history. It'll be the first county to ever win UK City of Culture, and it would bring lots of tourism to the northeast. But what difference would that make to Beamish in particular?
Yeah, it would absolutely drive that additional footfall. I mean, Beamish as a beacon in the northeast, we tend to drive a lot of tourism, both domestic and overseas across. I mean, that's been tricky over the last couple of years, and let's see if that builds up again. But certainly domestic and local footfall has been absolutely brilliant. We've seen growth on growth as coming out of the pandemic, which has been brilliant, which points us in the right direction. But I think it's also going to give us opportunities for overnight immersive stays as well, both at Beamish, because we're bringing on some overnight accommodation, which is new for us, but also in the county as well, to drive those folks to come and stay and then visit what is a fantastic region. The city itself is absolutely beautiful, with the cathedral and the streets and all of the offer there and the cultural offer there. But then there's a broader, wider area to visit across the whole of the county, and we're part of that. I'm very, very proud to be part of it.
Well, I must tell you that I am born and bred County Durham, so I do have my fingers crossed with them. But you know what? The people in Bradford, Wrexham County and Southampton, they love where they live too. So best wishes and good luck from a very hopeful County Durham.
Rachel Sweeney there, our North East of England correspondent, declaring her interest as any good journalist should. But of course, here at GB News, we wish all the best, not only to County Durham, but also to Wrexham, Southampton, and also to Bradford. All would be worthy winners. And I had to mention Bradford, because if I didn't, Gloria De Piero would have killed me. And Colin Brazier, because of both those fabulous GB News presenters, Bradford is their hometown. Time now for my daily interview series, Money Talks. And my guest today is Angela Knight, CBE. She's the former CEO of Energy UK, the trade association for the UK's energy industry, funnily enough. Now, regular viewers and listeners will know Angela's often appeared here on The Money, giving me her take on the energy crisis, on policy making. And today we've decided to spend a bit more time tapping into her political and energy expertise. It's fair to say Angela's had a very impressive and varied career. Before she took up the role at Energy UK, she spent over a decade in politics, serving as a Conservative councillor and MP, and then as a Treasury Minister, Economic Secretary to the Treasury, in the late 1990s. During the banking crisis in 2007, a tough gig. She was Chief Executive of the British Bankers Association before joining Energy UK in 2012. 3 years later, she was appointed Chair of the Office of Tax Simplification, a role she held until 2019. She knows her way around the energy industry, around government and around the fiscal accounts. Here to talk about her wide-ranging career and her current take on the energy crisis, it's Angela Knight, CBE, my latest guest on Money Talks. Angela, it's great to have you here in the studio. You usually join me remotely via your phone. You're running around all the time. You're still very, very active in public life. You've been a real friend to the show since we launched in September last year, and it's great to have you in the studio now. At the top of the show, I talked about the £100 tank of diesel. That's not for a van, that's for a 55-litre family car, which is the standard size.
Yeah.
Surely that can't go on.
No, I don't think it can either. I filled up at the weekend, and then my son decided the cheapest way to fill up his car was to bring it for me to fill it up as well. So in fact, I paid my £100 twice at the weekend. Yes, it's a lot of money. This is a considerable difficulty for people, but it's also a problem for the country, because whilst we quite rightly talk about what it means to individuals, what it means to families, and that's absolutely right, what it means to industry is important as well, because industry powers the economy, it's big employers. And I think that if I was the Chancellor, if I was in government at the moment, it would be looking at industry that I would do next. I would say, well, at least I've done something, a package. I appreciate there's arguments as to whether that package is big enough or not for people for the autumn, but I've done that package. Now to look at what can I do to get our industry as productive as possible, our output as strong as possible, because that, of course, is the way forward to getting out of the difficulties now and also avoiding some of the problems of the slowdown ahead.
You've really preempted my line of questioning.
Sorry.
No, it's absolutely. It's why you're here, because, as we often point out on The Money, there is no energy price cap for firms at all. Let's have a think. If there are 4 million drivers of diesel vans here in the UK, they're often builders, plumbers. They're often people, husbands and wives running small businesses. Those diesel costs will go straight into their prices. These aren't big companies. They can't afford to absorb that kind of loss. Their tiny margins will just be wiped away. Their business will go bust. It seems to me really, really inflationary when you have petrol and diesel prices as high as they are, and you've still got the Treasury taking about 50% of what we pay.
Well, that is the thing.
Whether you're a company or an individual, is tax.
It's a big cut. It's a big cut the Treasury gets out of fuel, out of gas, out of petrol, and out of
And as the prices go up,
diesel.
they get more and more VAT, sitting on a big windfall.
Absolutely. And he's not stupid, is our Chancellor. In fact, he's probably one of the brightest people we've had in that role for many years. And that is something that he'll be looking at. And I think we need to couple that with the phraseology he used in that interview of yours.
That clip we just showed, yeah.
Exactly, which implies that he is keeping a very close eye on what is happening. I mean, what is very difficult at the moment is to second-guess the autumn. I know we sort of kind of think we can, but we can't. I mean, if you take the decision of the EU, quite rightly in my view, to limit as much as possible importing oil from Russia, that's good, because that is putting a real, another marker down that their invasion of Ukraine is wrong.
But at what cost?
Well, it's exactly the point. Because what that will do, excuse me, will increase the wholesale price of oil. Now, will that mean that OPEC will come in and pump a bit more out?
The Energy Exporters Cartel.
The
Saudis, they're very close to the Russians these days. The Saudis obviously run OPEC. They don't run it exclusively. You've got the Iranians in, you've got the Iraqis in there, you've got the Qataris in there. Saudi are the big OPEC,
they are.
the big key member, but they seem very close to the Russians. They don't seem to be rallying to the West by pumping more oil to ease our cost of living crisis.
Well, I think that they will have done that partly because they're expecting this slowdown, whether it's a stagflationary type situation that we're going into, or whether it's just sort of classic, reduction in the size of the economy again. I do not know.
So they're worried about losing money if the world economy slows down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they're going to be careful. And what's more, of course, they've got their cards to play too, because a lot of this is this big geopolitical game, And what card they got? Well, they can hang on to that oil until they get something that they want. I don't know.
Extract something from the West.
Correct.
And then...
Correct. I don't know what's in their hand at the moment, but there's something in their hand. And after all, Putin has.
Well, they've already bought Newcastle United, or another football club.
Yeah, well, I'm not so bothered about football. Sorry about that. But Putin has certainly shown how to play the politics of energy. He's shown it to the world, and he's played his hand pretty well so far. So, you know, we are, all of us in Europe, in a difficulty as far as our gas and electricity is concerned. And that's spreading a bit wider, but, you know, it's really, really concentrated in Europe. And so that means that you can extract a price for helping Europe out, and we've told the world that. And, you know, by the comments that have been made and by the actions that we've taken here, we've told the world, and the world will take its price.
Lots of geopolitics going on. I'm trying to make light of it, but it will be really frustrating to people struggling to pay their petrol, diesel and fuel bills. I haven't spoken to you since the latest changes from the Chancellor, the windfall tax and so on. It's clear you want help for businesses. We've got lots of small manufacturers who are very energy intensive, no price cap for them. They're not like big manufacturers. They can't buy on futures markets and use sophisticated hedging techniques to protect themselves from soaring energy prices. But I wanted to ask you, Angela Knight, what did you think of the Conservative Party, a party that's dominated, you know, your public life? You've been a Conservative Treasury Minister, a Conservative Party imposing a windfall tax, raising more revenue by their own admission than Labour would have raised.
Yes, I know. It's extraordinary, isn't it? It's swinging around. Politics at the moment, sort of the left and right variety, are parked. At the moment, the politics is operational. It's what can I do now to alleviate these problems that keep on jumping
Ideology's just gone out the window, right?
Ideology's out the window. And I think in some respects it has to go out of the window in a time when you can argue that we've got a different sort of war on, but it is, you know, a real war, cost of living, and how to protect our people.
And there's a real East-West economic war.
Exactly. So you can't have ideology, you know, overtaking what is practically needed and practically required. Now, can I give you a couple of practical suggestions, though?
Go on, then.
And I'm coming back into industry, and I'm coming back into the fact of what you said, that they're big consumers, particularly of electricity. Now, I think that something that needs to be looked at is how you price what's called the electricity pool, the averaging mechanism, if you like. Because that pricing mechanism, you've got nuclear power, you've got wind power, you've got gas generation in there. And, of course, gas is the very high-priced generator at the moment, and it's more expensive than the nuclear and the gas. And that pool is priced approximately every half hour off the highest-priced generation. So what you're getting is electricity that is more expensive in that wholesale market because of the way that the algorithm operates.
So you could tweak it?
I think you tweak it. Well, you either tweak it or you extract gas from it or you do something or you cap it and you put a floor on. What you don't do is leave it alone.
We're going to have to pick that up another time. I look forward to welcoming you back on The Money, Angela Knight. As I say, you've contributed hugely to this show in recent months, and we look forward to hearing from you again soon.
Thanks very much.
Angela Knight there, the former head of UK Energy. Let's bring in a couple of your views just before we leave. Terry says the problem's not the government, but the oil companies and petrol stations. When oil prices rise, fuel prices follow. When the oil price drops, fuel prices don't go down. The next time oil prices rise, fuel prices go up from an already inflated level, John says. The best way for Rishi Sunak to raise money is to apply a tax of up to, say, 5p per kilowatt hour on all electricity produced by wind turbine farms and solar energy farms. These owners are making incredible amounts of money. That was John. Thanks for all your emails. It's been a tough show. You know, there's a lot of difficulties around. We try and be very honest and open with you here on The Money, having grown-up conversations with people who really know their stuff. I hope you feel that we've done that today. Do join me again tomorrow at 1. I'll be continuing to focus on this cost of living crisis, helping you beat the squeeze. But for now, this is GB News on GAB, DAB+, digital radio, TV and online. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On The Money.
Hello, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather updates. It's another day of heavy showers, particularly across eastern parts of England, southeast Scotland. There's some spots seeing some sunny spells, but it's on the cool side. High pressure is nearby, but low pressure is sitting right over us, allowing the air to rush up through the skies and create the heavy showers. Not many isobars on the chart, so again the winds are light, so again the showers are slow moving. Heavy ones particularly across the borders of Scotland, down into northeast England, down towards Lincolnshire. Some thunderstorms likely in this zone, but heavy showers elsewhere as well. Not many for South Wales and southwest England. Here, many places having a dry, fine afternoon with sunny spells, and here we could get to 17 or 18, but generally temperatures only in the mid-teens. A lot of cloud for Northern Ireland, turning quite damp here through the rest of the day, and that wet weather will then march its way slowly towards parts of Wales and northwest England overnight. The heavy showers in eastern areas will continue well into the evening before tending to fizzle out in most places as we head towards dawn. And again, it's not going to be a warm day, so overnight with clear skies it's going to be quite chilly with temperatures well down into single figures. Another fresh start then on Wednesday. Some sunshine around early on, but this zone of cloud and showers over the Midlands, northwest England will work again to the east. So by the afternoon, it will once more be eastern parts of England that see a lot of heavy showers. A drier day for Scotland and Northern Ireland. And again, not many showers for Wales and southwest England. So many western areas largely dry tomorrow with some sunny spells. But again, in the east, there will be showers. And again, they will be on the heavy side, and temperatures in most places only in the mid-teens. The showers will fade somewhat through Wednesday evening, which leads into things turning a bit drier as we head towards the long weekend. Drier and with some sunshine, a bit warmer, not completely free